Okay, calm down.
And what about Julian Assange? Because I know that you're speaking about him.
Yeah, it is so I know exactly what he's facing. You know, he once he is, you know, extradited to the U.S., he's going to go to the Fourth Circuit. He's going to go to the Alexandria jail. I went through all those experiences, and he's going to be going through trying to defend himself against the Espionage Act, and it is really almost impossible. I mean, that is a law, and the Department of Justice is using it quite effectively. It's a strict liability law. All they really have to do is say this person broke this law, and the courts aren't really going to challenge it. And then they'll throw up a canvas of national security to be able to not even show the defendant the evidence against them. That wasn't the case with me. They couldn't. And one miraculously favorable thing for me that came out of that court was the judge refused the government's move to prevent me from seeing any of the evidence against me. She basically said, well, he had access to all of that before. Why would he not be able to see it now? In one aspect of enlightenment for that judge. But it's almost impossible to defend against that. The government doesn't have to show harm. All they have to do is show, I guess, access or some sort of relation of classified information to someone who didn't have it. Julian Assange has been in the crosshairs of the government for a very long time, and they have him. And he's been sitting in prison for a very long time, and it's just going to be even more. What was disgusting to me is during the proceedings for extradition, the Queen's Counsel, through the coaching by U.S. Attorneys, Department of Justice, said that used my name and my case as an example of the fair treatment that Assange would be receiving in the U.S., particularly with regard to the court and sentence, because, yes, there is a speculation that he could have hundreds of years in prison if he's convicted. And I think that is true. I know that's true. I thought that was absolutely disgusting. It's like, you're going to use what happened with me, the travesty of a trial with me, as the benchmark for what Assange is facing. Yet they didn't bother to call me to offer any testimony about what he truthfully is going to be receiving. He's going to be facing a court that really has no concern about him as a human being with any rights at all. I mean, you're supposed to have constitutional protections. Well, he won't even have that because he's not a U.S. citizen.
Right.
He's going to be in our prison system, which, I had my own ordeal with that once I was in prison. I had to get the attention of a U.S. senator just to receive proper medical care in prison. What politician is going to stand up for Julian Assange? And they talk about also that they were mentioning how he's going to receive great mental, psychological help for the pressures that he's going to be under. That is insane. I remember distinctly when I was in prison, early days of being in prison. I'm still in shock, and I'm quite depressed. And I went to speak to a therapist there at the prison, and I said, I'm really down. I don't really feel like talking to you. Just leave me alone. And her response was, I either talk to her or she's going to put me in solitary confinement.
Wow.
So
Right.
in order to deal with my depression, deal with the mental issues that I'm having, you're going to put me in solitary confinement. That's the kind of environment that is awaiting Julian Assange. And during the proceedings,
Do they do that under the guise of protecting you from suicide? Is that why they put you in solitary? Is that the argument?
no, because
Just
I
punishment?
didn't exhibit any suicidal ideations at that point.
Okay, so it's just punishment.
She didn't like me.
Right.
And to her, the best way to get to a inmate is to put him in solitary. I mean,
So what did you
that's
do?
therapy. That's their therapy.
Right.
So
So what did you do, if I can ask?
I just being as polite as I could at that time. It's like, well, no, I'm still not talking to you. There's nothing to talk about. I mean, even going into it was a mandatory meeting with this individual as part of coming into the prison. I mean, she was so demeaning, so condescending to me. And it's like, well, you know what? I'll deal with my own depression. I'm fine. I find something to do here. And she's like, no, I needed to talk to her, or she's going to put me in solitary confinement.
Wow.
I mean, that's therapy in the U.S. prison system, especially in the federal system.
Wow. Reminds me of John Kiriaku's story.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, what Assange is facing is just horrific. It's an impossible battle. And now we're seeing, of course, it being used in a context that I think a lot of people are sort of shocked by, with former President Trump being charged of violating the Espionage Act. Um, I think this, unfortunately, may end up showing the differences in our criminal justice system for different individuals. But I will first say that the Espionage Act shouldn't be used against anyone. It is being used in such an overbroad manner that no one, including Trump, should be facing those charges the way it's being used. But the way it's being used, they couldn't not charge Trump with violating the Espionage Act. I think he is absolutely guilty of a tremendous amount of things with regard to national security and with regard to classified information. I think he's been putting his foot in his mouth a lot, I think, in efforts to defend it. But the thing is, all they have to show is that he had it, he didn't return it. Well, there's ample evidence. In my case, there was absolutely no evidence, no documents, nothing, because there was none. But yet I was found guilty of violating the Espionage Act. So really, the only question is with Mr. Trump is how much time he's going to get in prison. Because even individuals who, I mean, usually when Espionage Act charges happen, individuals most likely were going to plead, and they always plead to some time in prison. Now, I didn't plead. I was not going to plead to something I didn't do. Yet I also ended up in prison. It is such a slam dunk using the Espionage Act for the Department of Justice against potentially any defendant. Really, the only question left is how much prison time Trump should get.